there were reports that there's a warrant of arrest. Are you aware, and what are the reasons?
It's a story that's been going on for 3 years. We have someone who is extremely intolerant. I'm talking about Masisi, to the extent that he will mobilize state resources to achieve his self-interest. And I have been a target for all this time because I, amongst others, have spoken out about Botswana, which used to once be a shining star, a wonderful example of democracy on this continent, now reduced to a situation where we see the rule of law is being undermined. There's abuse of power. We see human rights abuses as well. We see attempts to capture 1 or 2 individuals in the judiciary. Fortunately, it's just 1 or 2. The rest remain committed to the principles of justice and fairness. We see corruption and self-enrichment. And all these things wrapped into one have seen that what we have tried to achieve, what we did achieve by those who came before us up until recently, being eroded. We worked very hard for our democracy. Democracy isn't like a tap that you can just switch on and switch off. You have to work on it. If I even give where I am as an example in South Africa, after democratization, it didn't mean it started from that day, everybody was suddenly a Democrat. To bring cohesion in society, to get people united, working together in concert with one another. It takes time. It takes individual commitment, and it takes leadership. And that is what has reversed our gains in Botswana, is a failure of leadership currently.
Is there a warrant of arrest?
They haven't issued a warrant of arrest yet. And I say yet because it is their intention to do so. That is a fact. Even yesterday on social media came out an article written by members of the intelligence service who indicated Masisi and Mahosi's having met and schemed up their intentions that by Christmas next month, myself and another gentleman called Colonel Khosi, the former head of the DIS, should be behind bars. So that's why in recent times you've seen this shuttling backwards and forwards, these warrants being issued, trying to implicate us, calling in their own people who work with me, detaining them without water, without food, taking away their phones, and intimidating them to try to implicate us, and threatening them that if they don't do so, they'll lose their jobs. It's the kind of thing you would expect in any democracy. In democracy, you know, it's a competition for representation, whether at parliamentary level or at council level. But he has shown himself immature, that kind of political immaturity, and even beyond political immaturity, that he cannot tolerate competition or opposition. And therefore he goes against, right from the time of the election, even in internal party elections, he displayed gross immaturity and intolerance against those who had the right, the constitutional right, to stand against him. That is the problem. He now thinks that being in office, it's all about him. He's intoxicated on power. It has gone straight to his head. What he does, the way he moves around, the amount of security he has around him, the way he talks to people.
What's your response to people who are saying you don't want to let it go? You still want to have control and influence the current president because you supported him, you actually nominated him.
There's nothing wrong with saying that. I expected him to toe the line of democracy. I expected him to toe the line that all my predecessors did for the country. That he, when you talk about succession, when you talk about successor, it's to build on what has already achieved, to improve upon what has been achieved. It doesn't have to keep everything that we had in place. I wasn't, in no way, I had given up office. I went around the nation saying goodbye. How would I want to say goodbye and hello, I'm back? No, I told them, if you've been watching even my social media posts, I've been going around, you've seen me at my farm, you've seen me doing charitable work, giving out, handing over houses, giving out wheelchairs. That's the work I do. That is no threat to his presidency. But he doesn't want to see me appearing in public.
Why?
That's a good question. When I've been invited to schools to do prize giving or to celebrate an anniversary of a school, a day or two before I go to the school, they will call me and say, the event is cancelled because you're coming. We've been told we cannot host you. Public officers have been told not to facilitate me. The government media have been told not to cover me.
In many countries on the continent, you have a situation where a former president and a sitting president are always having these challenges. What is the problem? How do we deal with this situation that is also playing itself in other countries?
This one is slightly different because, unless I'm mistaken, I may be mistaken, but that tends to happen where they come from different political parties. Where you see one party continuing after the other. In Mozambique, we have seen Frelimo. We saw how one president handed over to the next without a problem, never going after the predecessor. Tanzania, the same thing. There must be a number of examples. Namibia, South Africa. People
Not
from the
South
same party.
Africa, there was tension between former President Mbeki and President Zuma.
Yeah, okay. I was overlooking that one. But I won't claim to know exactly what that came about. But one thing I would say, there may have been tensions, but there was not harassment and imitation of the type that is going on in Botswana.
This tension clearly has an impact on Botswana.
You know, that's the sad part about it, because we all have serious concerns about the direction Botswana is going and where it is being taken, and how 50 years, just over 50 years of being a shining example, a shining star on the continent, is being eroded by a few people. Someone the other day said to me, he was once asked that if he left his country, which other country would he want to live in? And his answer was Botswana. But he said, now that's changed. And that was, it hit me hard. You know, I thought, hey, you know, look where we've come from, look what we've achieved. We're a small country, very small country, you know, economically, population-wise, and so on. But when it came to democracy, we were a giant. And everybody knew us for that achievement and our prudent economic management. Botswana was known for that. Now, that has just been destroyed.
The economic impact. What is happening on the ground in Botswana? You've just came to South Africa. You know better what's happening on the ground.
Corruption is on the rise. Self-interest has seen the erosion of what should be used in the public interest being used for self-interest and leadership cronies. Those are words that were used by this Forum for Action and Reform that I talked about. We see, especially during the COVID period, we see tenders that were awarded because he brought in a state of emergency. One of the longest state of emergencies in the world just to do with COVID. Just so that they could bypass normal, accountable and transparent procedures in procurement. And tenders and awards being given to people who are close to them, including relatives. And members of parliament have been asking for accountability of how those funds were spent, what process was used. That's why he was trying to hold on to the state of emergency even longer than what it is designed for. So, economically, we're in a bad place. Funds have been squandered. Maloba, they bought a farm from a private individual for 58 million pula. That must be over 60 million rand. And there's no explanation. It was not in the budget. It hadn't gone through parliament. A farm, but people on the ground are suffering the effects of COVID. People have lost their jobs. People are hungry, people are suffering. And they go and waste money buying a farm and trying to give it. And that farm was bought under the office of the president, the ministry. So that is the kind of Botswana that we live in today. Totally indifferent to the plight of the people. Indifferent to people's welfare. You know, there are three arms of government: the executive, the legislature, parliament, and the judiciary. It's the same in most democracies. Now, our executive has abandoned the cause of democracy. So we put them aside. There's no hope there. The legislature, parliament, most of the MPs come from the ruling party. And you may have heard it being said, including by an organization here in South Africa that monitors these things. And I've seen evidence of it, that the elections in 2019 were rigged. So most of those MPs shouldn't even be there. They wouldn't have had a majority. In my opinion, the main opposition party won those elections. And that is, I think, what is widely accepted in the country. So then you're just left with the judiciary. Now, they have lost, the state has lost a number of judgments in recent times. And now we begin to see an attempt to influence a couple of judges. I say a couple, because like I said earlier, most of the judges are still honorable men and women who respect the rule of law. They know what their job is as the justice is to deliver justice in a fair manner.
Are you destabilizing President Masisi and Botswana?
But I'm doing them within the confines of the law. I am out there trying to motivate, persuade, influence people that come the elections, these people need to be removed. That's how I'm doing it. But because of the intolerance I'm talking about, the last time I checked, if Botswana is supposed to be a democracy, there's something called freedom of speech. So when you go around and you talk, you look at what happens in your own country. I have watched some of your parliamentary sessions. When you see the EFF going at the ruling ANC the way they do. But there are no consequences. They even do it outside at political rallies. The DA do the same thing. and all other opposite parties. That is democracy. That is the nature of the beast. But in Botswana, it's not allowed. You shouldn't do that.
You have been in the country, you met people, and you also indicated when I spoke to you the last time that you wrote letters to some heads of state and government in the region and on the continent about the current situation in Botswana. Have you received responses, and what is your expectation, particularly from SADC?
I have met some eminent persons from in South Africa and outside South Africa. I have met civil society representatives. I have met people from the government, some people from the ANC as well, and people from Botswana. To there, Zimbabwe, to a couple of other presidents, I wrote letters on the continent who I felt were harassing their opposition leaders, which was not the right way to do things. It's not tolerant. So when you ask me now what are my expectations of SADC, well, I can talk about then, and we all know what happened. The late President Mugabe is no more. There were those leaders at that time. They know what my position was and why I did it. But now there are different leaders in some cases. I think Angola, the Angolan president came in maybe just before I left. We have a new president in Zambia, in Malawi. Zimbabwe came in just before I left. President Ramaphosa came in just before I left. So there are a number of new presidents. So I don't know how they will deal with the situation, like what's happening in Botswana. But here in South Africa, my expectation is higher, because maybe I'm looking at it from a more personal point of view, that when my father was president, he, because I remember him talking to me about it, said, I will allow those cadres from the ANC, from the PAC, other liberation movements, to come to Botswana because they are being persecuted in South Africa by the apartheid regime. I will allow Samora Machel and his people to come through Botswana. I will allow Sam Nujoma from Namibia to come into Botswana. And they all went through Botswana. And the South African regime, the apartheid regime at the time, threatened us with military action, with economic blockades, which they actually implemented. But my father, remember, said, no, I will stand firm because that is the right thing to do. These are our brothers and sisters. And we will stand with them against persecution. So it's ironic that I find myself here, being my father's son, who helped South Africans, our brothers and sisters, to pass by, to stay in the country when they're being persecuted, that now here I am in this country, even though I'm not seeking asylum, but I came here for a meeting to discuss my persecution in Botswana. And it's just comforting for me that I'm in a country with people who went through that, and I hope they understand what I'm going through. Although I'm not comparing apartheid to what I'm going through, because apartheid was a crime against humanity. But we are heading in that direction in Botswana when we talk about persecution of people and the human rights violations.
You said you are not seeking asylum. Are you hoping to go back to Botswana? If so, when?
I'm not hoping. I'm intending to go back to Botswana. In fact, I would have already gone back last week and even earlier this week. But then I got requests for meetings and consultations. So I thought, well, whilst I'm here, let me just deal with those, get them out of the way, and then I'll go back.
Are you not afraid that upon landing, you are likely to be arrested?
That is the intention. I don't know when. It may be upon landing. It may be a few days or a couple of weeks later. But that is the intention. And that intention will remain there for as long as Masisi is in office. It will happen because that's what they want to do. People on the inside tell us this. And we have seen from all their actions in recent times that their attempt to try to implicate me by hook or by crook is to get me behind bars. And once behind bars, then there'll be some life-threatening event which will take place to make it look like an accident. And then I would disappear.